welcome to Emotion Chips, where we talk about the real reason everything happens for a reason. I'm your host, Charlie Carroll, along with my wonderful co-host, Mallory Redmond.
Kind of boring.
Wonderful, pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, it's not bad.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is episode 10. Welcome to all of you who are tuning in
Sure.
via video. Yeah, episode 10.
Wow. Double digits.
Yes, we finally made it. We're no longer in those single digits. Welcome to the program, Mal.
Yeah. Hello.
Welcome to all of you that are going to emotionships.com or the wonderful social
LinkedIn.
media. Yeah, LinkedIn or the other social media platforms. We just want to tell you that we recognize you're watching.
Yes.
There are people that like the videos, that tune in just to see the videos.
Yeah, that's good. That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you for tuning in to see us.
Yes, you get more. For those of you that have tuned in to see us, I have some wonderful treats. Yeah,
Do you now?
I do. Here's the first one.
Okay.
Mallory brought these down from, or brought these with her. These are an assortment of boozy little.
Assortment.
Yeah, that's what it says. An assortment of boozy little chocolate truffles. London gin, Scotch whiskey, Navy rum, and Prosecco.
Yeah.
Right there. For those of you that are tuning in, these are from Trader Joe's.
They're from my dad.
Oh.
Thanks,
way to go.
Dad.
Way to go, Dad.
Shout out to
that
Dad.
doesn't seem like they're imported from England. It doesn't seem like something your dad would send you.
Oh, no, my dad
He likes
Yes.
the chocolates, the boozy chocolates,
likes
huh?
the boozy. Well, he likes anything from Trader Joe's. Did you know that the Joe, the founder of Trader Joe's, just passed away last week?
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Did you know I tried to bring a Trader Joe's to North Dayton?
And obviously was unsuccessful.
Well, it was not long after the economic crash in 2008. I think it was 2009 or 2010 when I did that.
Yeah.
And they said, we have suspended all expansion for the unforeseeable future.
Oh.
Unforeseeable.
Unforeseeable.
Yeah, unforeseeable future.
Well,
So I did not do it. But I felt like north of Dayton, up there around 70 and 75, really could have used a health-focused grocery store.
yeah. We love
So.
Trader Joe's.
The second thing that we have here, don't ask me to read this for you, but I can show you the picture in the back of this beautiful author,
Wonderful.
Mallory Redmond. Since this is not written in English, can you tell our viewing audience and those listening what this says?
I can't.
What's the name of the book?
I can't remember.
You don't know. How many books have you written, Mal?
Okay, well, so I wrote a book back in, I don't remember, 5 years ago maybe,
Yeah.
that they published in English and Afrikaans, which
Yes.
is a South African language.
Thank you.
Then they took that book and they repurposed it, I don't know exactly what all they did, into a second book, which is this. And I can't remember the title of it. I don't remember what they titled it. But this is I just got a box in the mail today of the Afrikaans version because, they send me a bunch of.
Yeah.
And so that one's for you, buddy.
Wow.
I'll sign it for you.
I was going to
if
say,
you'd like.
would you?
You can't read it, but
No, I can't.
yeah, that's
But
okay.
you know what I like to do is I like to read stuff like this and try to,
Figure out.
figure out what is being said.
You could sit in an airport and be reading that, and people will maybe someone would recognize the language and come up and start talking to you in Afrikaans.
Yeah, this is a nice hat you have on. How old were you here?
That was in 2013.
Man. MalloryRedmond.com, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay.
That's what it says.
Yeah, well, that's my website. It's not seen a lot of love lately.
Yeah, I know how that goes. I have plenty of sites out there that have not seen love for a while, but we're going to circle back around to them.
Okay.
So over this past week, I was traveling.
Hold
again.
on.
Yeah.
Big shocker. Charlie was traveling again. Hold your breath, everybody. Florida.
Yes, that is all true.
Applause.
Work trips. Oh. Yeah, there we go.
Yes.
I'm going to figure out these other buttons
You
too.
could maybe get partial, I don't know, some sort of residency in Florida with as much time as
Well,
you
they're increasing that actually. I don't know that. I forget how many days it is right now, but they're getting ready to increase that so people cannot have the tax advantages without
Gotcha.
really, really living there all the time. So that's another story. But I have a funny story for you.
Perfect.
I was in Florida this past weekend and went with a friend to a invite-only art show at Louis Vuitton.
Oh, gosh, you're too fancy for us.
Well, I was not the VIP. I was with...
You were the plus one.
Yeah, I was with a VIP. And so it reminded me, someone else, another friend went with us. And so we were talking, and the friend said to me, what do you think that cost? And he pointed to a little wallet. And I said, I don't know. I would guess it would be somewhere around $400. And he said, yeah, that's too much for me. And I told him the story. It reminded me of the story that I then told him when I was first in that store down in Florida. I was with my friend. I was traveling, and they said, you've been gone a while. You need to get your wife something. And this is 5 years ago. And I wasn't overly familiar with the brand. I knew it, and I knew a lot of my wife's girlfriends, and my wife, looked at and liked the bags, but I didn't know too much about it because I also feel like the emphasis at that time was more bags, and it wasn't a lot of things that it is.
Like accessories and all that.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, yeah, you know what? You're right. I will. I'll just find a wallet to get for her because I've been traveling for 6 or 7 days, and it would be nice to come home. And so I'm looking, and I find this smaller wallet, and we're going to the counter, and my friend says, you know what? Like, I'll just pick that up. I'm going to buy something for myself anyways. I'll just pick that up for you
sure.
as a nice gesture.
Yeah.
And I had not seen the price for it.
What?
No, I because they don't always have the price. Well, let me say this. On their wallets and on their bags, they don't have the price. You look at it, and then to see the price, you have to open up like the carrying case, the velvety or the cloth carrying
I would
case.
100% open that before going to the register.
I didn't see it, and so I picked out a smaller.
Okay.
We're
so different.
There was ego there too.
Of course,
right?
Yeah, I can tell.
Yeah, so I pick out one that looks affordable, and my friend is like, "Well, I'm just buying something bigger anyways. Like, you've done some things for me. I'll just buy this, and you can give it to your wife and say it's from you." And I was like, "No way! Like, I'm not doing that. That's crazy.
That doesn't feel great. Yeah."
And so my friend tried again, and I said, "Nope, not doing it." And about that time, the woman, the sales rep, walks up to us and says, "Okay, so are you purchasing this?" And I just said yes, because in my mind,
were you nervous at all about the price?
Yeah, I was.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I was nervous about it, just because I wasn't prepared to drop a lot of money on a little wallet.
Right.
And so I thought to myself, like, as long as it's under, $500 or lower, I'm fine. I'll survive it and I'll be good. And so then she walks up and she says, "Hey, are you taking this?" And I said, "Yeah." And I just gave her my credit card.
Oh my gosh, I'm so anxious right now.
Yeah. So I have my American Express hooked up to my phone. And again, I'm just thinking like $500, we're all good. My wife will be excited. I've been traveling. I've been making money. It's fine. No big deal. Don't worry about it. Well, I'll never forget when the transaction goes through because it pops up on my phone because it's connected to my wallet on my
Did your phone
iPhone.
just like burst into flames?
The notification drops down, and literally I almost pass out.
Was there a comma?
$4,900.
What? For a wallet?
Goofy.
Was there cash inside of it already?
Goofy me somehow, without knowing it, picks this limited edition.
Of course.
And a wallet now becomes as expensive as a car.
Truly.
And so I thought to myself, oh my gosh.
What did you and your ego do then?
Well, I just started thinking to myself, like, what am I going to do? I'm with my friend. My friend drove. I don't have a car. Like, I'm not driving this back. Like, what am I going to do?
Yeah. What did you do?
I took it home and I gave it to my wife.
What? Are you kidding?
No, I'm not. It took me a little bit of time to pay it off. Yeah. Taught me a great lesson, though.
Check the price.
Yeah, and don't have so much of an ego that you just say, yeah, I'll take it.
I hope she still uses that wallet.
I know she still uses it from time to time, and I imagine it's something that will be around for a very long time, and she will give to our daughter.
I hope so.
It actually was her first Louis ever.
I am sweating from that story.
Yeah, it was pretty wild.
My husband brings me home like a candle from his trips. Stops by Bath and Body Works.
Yeah. So it just reminded me I was just telling that story that here he is looking around trying to make sure that his girlfriend has something and he doesn't break the bank. And I was just kind of warning him that sometimes that can backfire on you. So he checked the price.
Gosh.
Yeah, it was
It
pretty
wasn't
wild.
even for like a birthday or anything.
No. Nope.
Oh my goodness. That's quite a story.
It was pretty wild.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, I think we all learned a little something today.
we did.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, we did.
I forget where. I know I was supposed to take us somewhere and I can't quite remember. I'm in shock from your story.
Way to go, Mal.
I've actually never heard. A lot of times I hear the stories prior, but that one was a new one for me.
Yeah.
Where would you like to go next? I know. I wanted to talk about your Instagram.
Perfect. Let's do that.
I had your Instagram. For those that don't follow you on Instagram, it's Charlie Carroll.
Yeah, that's right.
Four L's.
Well, the last two are supposed to look like eyes for the second. But yeah, I had to use L's.
Technically, it's
yeah.
I loved this post that you've been quite active on the gram lately.
I've been active on the gram.
That's good.
Yeah.
I like it. But I love this post that you put up a couple days ago about a school teacher who wrote these math problems out on the board. And she starts 9 times 1 equals 7, 9 times 2 equals 18, 9 times 3 equals 27, and goes on through until 9 times 10 equals 90, which, I mean, that's how I do math, right? 9 times 1 equals 7. So then when she was done, she looked to the students, and they were all laughing at her because of the first equation, which was wrong. And the teacher said the following: I wrote that first one wrong on purpose because I wanted you to learn something important. This was for you to know how the world out there will treat you. You can see that I wrote the right thing 9 times, but none of you congratulated me for it. You all laughed and criticized me because of the one wrong thing that I did. So the post goes on to say the world will never appreciate the good you do 1,000,000 times, but will criticize the one thing you do. Don't get discouraged. Rise above the laughter and the criticism.
Yeah.
It's like such good words.
Yeah, it's really magical for me. This is something I'm super passionate about because growing up, I was diagnosed as dyslexic in 5th grade after school was really, really tough for me. And so I would have gaffes and I was scared half to death to talk in front of people, which is kind of ironic, just
considering all you do now.
Yeah. And was made fun of a decent bit. And then now being an entrepreneur where I am either creating things myself or coming beside people that create things, it really resonated. The story resonated with me because that is the culture that we live in. Yeah. That you can do 100 things and 99 of them are really good, and you make one mistake and everybody is easing their own insecurities by finding the one mistake that you made and laughing about it.
Right.
I've told a couple of stories on here recently where my kids now are at school and they love life, and because they love life and are willing to put themselves out there, that's intimidating to other students. And typically the way other students ease their own personal insecurities is by trying to figure out something that they can make fun of with the people that they view to be stronger or more valuable or have more friends than they do. And so they'll look for, the one way that maybe something doesn't look right, or teeth that haven't had braces yet, or whatever it is, and they'll use that to tear people down. But if you read my caption or my summary of that post, that's what I was saying. I don't want to be the husband, the spouse, the father, the leader, the employer that looks past the 99 things someone did right only to emphasize the one thing or the two things they did wrong.
Right.
And I feel like that resonates with a lot of entrepreneurs, not just myself, and really just people in general, that here we are, we take, in most cases, a leap of faith to get something done, and then someone comes in and says, well, good job, but look at that. Right? And
right.
That's really done out of ignorance, is what I have found. And most of the time, the people that point out the one thing that was left undone really do mean well.
Sure.
They've been trained to find mistakes. And I was thinking about this earlier. When it comes to building things, or when it comes to a business, people need to understand that the object of any business should not be to eliminate mistakes or to be perfect. The way you really build a business that contributes and adds value to its community or to its customers is by building something that has a purpose or a cause, and then learning to do that as good as you can. But in order to do it as good as you can and to get better, you've got to be willing to fail and recognize failure as part of the process. And so I was with someone the other day, and they were articulating that they felt like a move we had made several years ago was a failure. And I didn't correct them, but it was just like, it wasn't a failure. We were learning how to get it right. And now we know not to make that move, whereas we did not know that before, because we went down that road and it did not deliver the way it should have, or the way we thought it would initially. And so if you're going to be good at something, you've got to be really comfortable with not getting it right so that you can get it right.
Right.
I say to people regularly that your best is good enough, but your best will never be your best. And those are two different things as to how we think, right? Like, I've got to be okay with my best effort today, but I know that my effort at this a year from now will probably be better because I'm going to try it, and it's probably not going to turn out as good as it could the second time or the third time I did it, but my best was good enough. And so there's something about a person's disposition that really has a lot to do with whether or not they ever get to the top of their craft, or at least doing things as good as they can do them, by their disposition and how they view setbacks or failures or disappointments.
Well, we often say, which I think is so helpful, that failure is just like unwillingness to try.
Yeah.
And so we even, recently have experienced the value of failure. And how else are you going to learn how to improve it? And so being able to come back at it the second, the third, the 150th time and continue trying, that's a success then.
Well, yeah, and you're 100% right. I think what's important is to recognize the 200 years of history in this country and where we came from, is especially when it comes to the rise of industry and commercialism, right? Just that, if you're a publicly traded company today, you have to be in business to make a profit. And so it really becomes wins and losses and fulfilling objectives more than it does learning at times. And so when you look at our parents and our grandparents, and then you look at some of the world wars, like getting things right was very important. And then you had children and grandchildren come along in that very like culture or context. And we unintentionally started indirectly communicating to our children and grandchildren that their value in school and even their value in life had a lot to do with them listening and obeying and getting it right the first time. And so then what happens is people become ostracized, children become ostracized because maybe they don't communicate the same way as their parents communicate. Maybe there is a learning disability where they can't think when they're under pressure. And now all of a sudden, it seems, at least to them, when someone older than them is looking at them and questioning them, or is communicating with their disappointment through their face or their posture, they start to feel, that child or grandchild starts to feel a certain way and very quickly associate their personal value with what they can produce or the lack of errors that is in their work or is in their life.
Right.
And it really crept into the Protestant church and even the Catholic church, that all of a sudden it became about not doing things, not making mistakes, not missing marks, right? That's the word for hamartia, which is the word sin. Like sin is a word that is so blown out of proportion, and we don't even realize that it was done that way by ignorant people, and not always ignorant people, but as a tool to control others. If you're making mistakes or quote unquote missing the mark, well, you're going to need to listen to me that much clearly.
Yeah.
You know, things like that. And so what I put in the caption of that post is like, we've got to do a good job and start recognizing that in order to produce and to live our best life, we've got to be okay with making mistakes, because that's part of the learning process.
Right. How do you kind of guide your kids through that as they're in school? They're like actively like classroom learners right now. I don't know kind of what their strengths and weaknesses. Like math was 100% my weakness. Like I would be crying every single night because of math.
Yeah.
How do you teach them what you're saying?
Yeah. First and foremost, we have them at a good school that understands the importance of the individual and how each individual learns, right? Yeah. And the school system is, has been around since 63 and is passionate about figuring out how each individual learns. So that helps. The second thing is, I have found that we are the opposite of how a lot of us were raised, and that is, when you focus on or develop a culture that focuses on the absence of mistakes, fundamentally your belief, whether you know it or not, is that that's where a person's value is, or that's how something is accomplished. Mm-hmm. And so what I have found in leading people for, over 15 years is that almost every person out there, even people that do not have a roof over their head tonight, realize that they were designed to contribute and to do something good with their life. And if you've never been with an addict, or you've never been on the street with someone that is in transition without a roof over their head, you really don't you really don't have the right to tell us how they think and what their motivations are or are not for getting out from where they are at. And I say that because I have been in these situations a decent amount, and almost every single person I meet wants to be in a better place. They want to grow. They do want to be the best version of themselves. And so I think one of the reasons why we have a healthy culture throughout the businesses that we lead is because we start with the assumption that people want to grow. People want what is best for their life. People want to live that epic story that outlives their breath.
Yeah.
And so when you start there, then I work backwards, and I find myself with my children and those I lead de-emphasizing mistakes. Did you do your best?
Mm-hmm.
Did you give this your best effort? Were you concentrating? What did you hear? No, you got this. Like this, put this in perspective. It's not as big of a deal.
So as a business owner, because there's similarities in parenting and being a business owner, but
sure.
there are some big differences. And so I'm curious, at what point do you move on from an employee? Like if they continue to make mistakes, but they are doing their best, like where is the line there?
Well, it comes back to, and I've had to learn this. This took a while to learn. You have to have the appropriate steps in place to make an informed decision on who you're hiring. And primarily what that means is you have to be able to look at that person and put them through a hiring process that gives you a clear picture as to who they are and where they are at in their personal journey, all across the board from a health standpoint. Are they emotionally healthy enough to fulfill this role?
Mm-hmm.
Are they physically healthy enough to step into this position? And so when we do not extend an offer to someone, it's not because we think they are any less valuable than anyone in the company. It just might not be the best fit because right now in their journey, they are still growing from a relational standpoint that where we are at would be throwing them into an unnecessary fire that is going to do nothing more than discourage them and expose too many of their weaknesses. Now, that being said, there are people that we see that we have questions because they're really close on the line, and we do our best to say, here's what we see. It could be a little sticky. If you're up for it, we're up for it. We'll take the jump with you. And so you start off with a really good hiring process so you know exactly who you're hiring. But then even as they go through training and then get placed into the culture and they have responsibility, it still comes back to reminding them of why they're there. They're not there to be mistake-free.
Right.
They're there to live and to fulfill their role and to contribute in a way that paints a picture bigger than they could paint in and of themselves by themselves. To be a part of a team and to contribute on a bigger level and to have impact in the community.
So if the mistakes continue to happen, but you see a pattern of them trying and wanting to be better, you continue to take the mistakes for the sake of...
Well, it comes down to, hopefully there are people around them that are more mature, they've been doing it longer, and they can see why the mistakes are being made. If someone is intentionally not doing something, then we have a problem and we missed it in the hiring process. Mm-hmm. We will go to a person, a couple of times and just say something, and then it will enter into, if that's not changing, it will enter into a written process that basically just says, hey, we've seen this, we've brought it to your attention, it's not improving, and if it doesn't change, then it's going to be best for us to go in different directions because something just does not seem to be working.
Mm-hmm. I feel like that's so transformational for a person to experience in the workplace, particularly where they could make a mistake that others are aware of, and like the floor doesn't, they don't like get swallowed into the floor and never return.
Well, the biggest problem that we have, and I think this is true of most employers, is that people associate their personal identity with their performance. Mm-hmm. And so when that is true, they become afraid to make mistakes because that will resonate with something someone said to them or maybe how their parents raised them. And then they become fearful of taking on new things or taking on more responsibility, and they don't grow. Yeah. The only thing that does grow in that scenario is frustration.
Right.
And so for us, we try to create environments and cultures that encourages people to move forward and to take on new levels of responsibility, knowing that it's not their successes or their failures that define them. Mm-hmm. And we could get into intrinsic value, but The point is just that it's nothing that you're going to do great or that you're going to do poor that makes you valuable or that should give you the confidence to move forward in life. Yeah. I was just saying this yesterday at a staff meeting. Like, no matter where you are, whether it's in a restaurant environment, whether it's in a dentist office, or whether you're changing oil at Pennzoil, you have to take on resistance. Like, progress is an uphill journey. And so you can be frustrated with where you are currently, but you've probably reached a certain level of responsibility that you're going to have to move through. You can't move around. You can't escape it. Or else you'll go to a new entity, and 2 years from now or 4 years from now, you'll be right back at the same place, and you're not going to be happy 4 or 5 years from now because you've never gotten over that obstacle, which was encouraging you to press in, not run away.
Like, can you give an example?
Yeah, we recently had the situation with an employee that has been working for us for a while. And relationally speaking, they're great. They're fun to be around. They're a good people person. They're organized. They're good with details. But what we started to notice is after they take on more responsibility, there's a 12 to 18 month cycle where they take that on, they achieve that, they learn it, and they're ready for something more. Mm-hmm. Well, in a couple of different instances, they have gotten to that glass ceiling and have not been able to move past it here recently. And so thankfully, we watched just their behavior to see that it was becoming personal, that it wasn't a professional setback or obstacle. It started to become personal, and they started to shut down and just be a different version of themselves.
Because of something happening in their personal life.
That too, but even just not having the tools in their tool belt to take that next step or grab that next rung on the ladder. And so when you see that there's an opportunity for them to progress and reach for that next rung on the ladder, but there's a hesitancy or a level of fear, right? Whether that's fear of failure or something else that becomes like a personal reflection, then we've got to stop and say, okay, we have met a level of responsibility or found a level of responsibility that is really triggering something in you that we need to slow down, identify what it is, and then help you take that head on and alleviate that fear or confront that fear. Like, am I good enough? Or am I valuable enough around here? Or am I cared for? Or am I important, right, in my task or in my role? Mm-hmm. We need to help you figure out what that is and then learn to think about it the right way and maybe take on these new responsibilities in pieces or tone down your schedule, because maybe it's not the new level of responsibility you've been invited into, but maybe you're just taking on too much and you're tired. Maybe you're not honoring a day of rest and therefore you're stressed out. And in order to get over this obstacle, you're going to have to feel refreshed and energized, not weary and stressed out type of thing.
So what would you say to somebody listening who maybe is identifying themselves as that person?
Yeah.
But does not work in an environment, because this is pretty unique, right? Where like the employer or somebody in management would be able to recognize what this employee is going through.
Sure.
And so what would you say to somebody that's working in an environment where like they don't know who to talk to about this? Like they're kind of feeling left to unpack all of that on their own.
Sure. Yeah. I think that, this is an emotion ship, what we're talking about. We're talking about when we associate our personal value and our worth with our ability to function at a certain level or accomplish a certain task. The reason why it becomes so personal or so disappointing or so emotional is because there's that emotion ship there, that relationship there that says, if I do this, I'm good. If I can't do it, I'm not so good, right? And then other messages enter into the equation, like another emotion ship that affects all of us is, if I can't make enough money, I'm in trouble. Mm-hmm. If I can't make enough money, like my needs could go unmet, or I could be alone, or I could die, I could starve, right? And so what is important to remember is that energy, the energy of that message, like my life depends upon my current job and being employed. We've got to understand that thought is not a fact. It's a potential reality, but it's not a fact. And what will happen is that thought in and of itself has the ability to put you into a state of fight or flight, where the blood goes from the front of your brain to the back and you lose your conscientiousness, start to become very reactionary. And like in this employee's case, you start to see other employees and other colleagues almost as threats or people that could sabotage you, or that people that are out to get you, when that's not the case, because you've turned inward because of that emotion ship that says, if I can't do this, then this is the case. Or if I'm not doing this, or if I'm not winning here, I'm not valuable.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's an emotion chip. And so what I would say to the person is, if you find yourself in a situation where you cannot get out of, or you can't get past where you feel like you are, what is good is for you to search yourself and kind of do this inventory that says, what are the attachments? What are the emotion chips I have to how I perform, right? How do I learn to separate who I am and my value from what I do and what I can produce? Because what that's going to do is it's going to free you up and make you lighter and that much more able to produce or to be the best version of yourself. In golf, a lot of people that try to putt a second time make it the second time. And they don't make it because they saw something different. They make it because there's not the same pressure on them to make it. And they swing loose and they don't have all of the pressure, and it goes in. Dave Stockton, who is a putting coach, who some consider to be one of the best putters of all time. He wrote a book about the art of putting. And he's worked with big names, all of the big names out there. Now his son has taken over his practice. But one of the things that he says is the number one rule in putting is don't try to make it, which seems so odd. Right? Find your line that you think you need to hit the ball on, find your pace, and honor those two things. Don't try to make it. Try to put it down your line, try to put it with the right pace, and that will relax you and free you up and give you that much more of a chance, of a shot.
Yeah. So when you're asking yourselves, and something I think would be helpful that for us to put out is like some questions people can ask themselves to start to learn like where they are in terms of like where do I place my value on like myself? Like when do I find myself worthy or valuable?
Well, we have, whether you call it a thermostat or a gauge, like you'd see on your dashboard in your card, we have that. And it's really like our attitude. And often most of us find ourselves in a situation where when everything, all of the pieces are in the right place, we're in a good mood. Mm-hmm. But the moment anything that is outside of us is rearranged or not in place, our attitude reflects that, as if the quality of our life or our potential is determined by everything being in its appropriate place. If you think everything is in the appropriate place right now, it's just an illusion. Mm-hmm. And even if it were, anything can change like that.
Oh yeah, right.
Just in a moment.
Yeah.
And so it's a call to free ourselves of the attachments and all of those messages that were directly, indirectly, intentionally, unintentionally instilled into us by people who were doing their best. They didn't know better.
Yeah. So that's what I think can get overwhelming is once you realize, because, we know a lot of like performance driven people.
Sure.
And the constant feedback I always hear is like, but I don't know how to get out of it, or now what? I recognize this, and it kind of feels like you're staring at Everest in front of you.
Sure, it's the principle of coordinates, and you can know where you are by knowing where something else is, right? And so when you make yourself the center of your own universe, that often becomes very isolating because you're moving, right? Like you move every day. Your emotions change every day. Like our attitudes aren't the most stable thing in the world. How we think changes. Like everything about us, what we're interested in, what we want, what we think will make us happy, like all of those things are changing on a regular basis.
Yeah.
So the invitation is to find coordinates, like your GPS or your maps on your phone work off of coordinates. It's where one thing meets something else, right? And so that's what I have found to be helpful with people that feel like they're stranded or out in a desert or they're lost and they're lonely. Like figure out where you exist in comparison to something else. Meaning, like you can take your beliefs or your values and you can write them down and those become your new coordinates. I want my attitude to be one that is joyful, that even when it is disrupted, within 30 minutes, I want to confront whatever is disrupting my peace or my joy with this belief that I've written out. And those are my new coordinates that might, it's not supposed to tell me if I'm there or not. It just tells me where I am in relation to it.
Yeah, that's good.
And so that's kind of the problem I have with the misnomer of people say, well, speak your truth or find your truth. No, your truth is going to move. Your truth is going to change. Like you don't think how you thought at 21 today, right? Like,
thank goodness.
Right. But if I tried to tell you that when you were 21, you would have been optimistic, which is great, right? Like applause. We want optimistic people. There's nothing wrong with being optimistic.
Sure.
And so when you're 21 and someone says, well, wait till you get to be 30, right? Or somebody that's 60 says, wait till you get to be 60. What they're saying is they're testifying to just how much things change.
Yeah.
And so the 25-year-old or the 40-year-old says, I don't know if it will, right? And that's fine, but it does. And so we are changing all of the time. And when you find people that say, speak your truth, find your truth, it tends to be people that have been hurt and isolated or ostracized for being different than other people. And what they're really saying there when they say, find your truth, speak your truth, like it's your truth, it's whatever your truth is. What they're saying is my voice was never heard.
Right.
And it tends to be an issue with the third chakra, that their words based on who they were around or the environment that they were raised in never really landed, that the people around them were in a state of immaturity or trauma themselves to where they did not know how to listen and let that person's voice be heard and then repeat it to them or communicate it back to them in a way that says, you are valuable, right? Whether we agree or not, your opinion is valuable.
Matters,
and so
yeah.
I'm not interested in shooting down other people's opinions, but just the definition of truth is that which adheres to the facts. That there, we talked about that in a recent episode, that truth can be known. And the nature of truth, right, the nature of it is that it is absolute. And those become our coordinates. And things change and move, and that's a part of the context of that particular truth. But at the end of the day, there's a danger in saying, well, what's right for you is right for you, and what's right for me is what's right for me. Well, does that mean if I want to run stop signs or run red lights, I can do that because it's right for me, but it's not right for you, so you're going to honor them? No. In the greater context of a bigger community, all of us lose a little bit of our rights. And typically it's not totally, it's just partially, so that we can all get along and promote the promotion of life on a macro level. Yeah. I heard a story recently of a person probably in their early 20s that had been going to City Church here and just said that they were not going to come anymore because they're just still trying to figure out whether or not God exists. And my challenge to them would be like, God does not exist?
Everybody needs more information.
Yeah. Well, what I mean by that is when the Hebrew people were receiving the revelation of Yahweh 8,000 years ago, they refused to fully spell out his name. They left one letter out. And I love the principle, and it took me years to understand this and to learn this. They did that as a way to say our understanding of and our perspective of this infinite God can never be complete. And we dare not put the last letter in and fool ourselves into carrying ourselves in a way that would say, we've got this guy figured out.
Right.
And so when Jesus comes to Peter in a dream, right, up to that point, Peter was a Jew and he was not going to eat certain foods. And so in this dream, God lowers down a sheet full of all of the, what you used to do off of your bed, like with your stuffed animals. God lowers down a sheet in front of Peter and says, rise and eat. And Peter says, no way. Yeah. And Jesus says, what I say is clean, don't you say is unclean. Yeah. And the message there is, we have not been given or afforded the right to figure God out in a way that says, here's who he is, this is how he works, this is what he means. We draw a circle around that or put that all in a box and then don't have to live the rest of our life by faith.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
God has the right, and believe it or not, it can be built into his grace and his sovereignty and his omniscience that he doesn't have to do everything or reveal himself the same way today that he did 1,000 years ago. Mm-hmm. And instead of that inspiring fear, which it does to the person that was raised in fear or was introduced to God via fear, it should promote faith. Yeah. Why? Bringing this all back in. Because our personal value and our worth is not in what we get right or get wrong. God did not invite us into knowing him and having a relationship with him because of what we can get right or how much we know or how good we are. Mm-hmm. And so therefore, we're to leave the story, the finished story, unwritten in order to stay curious and to stay open to better see and hear things. When we know how it's all going to work, well, then we can't see everything. And someone would quote the verse to me, well, what would you say about the verse that says God is the same way yesterday, today, and forever? That's speaking of his character. Yeah. There are certain things about God's character that are not going to change. However, when it comes to his relationships and how he interacts with his creation, as his creation evolves and as the day is different and different things like technology come around, like God communicates in an effective way. In order for him to communicate in an effective way, that means he has the right to do things differently. It's one of the major reasons that prayer exists. Prayer is a tool, a buffer, a margin that God built into this whole faith story that gives us the power to not only dialogue and have a conversation, but to change intended realities. Mm-hmm. And we see that back in the life of Moses and the life of Abraham. Yeah. We're an important part of this story. Yeah. And so when somebody says to me, I don't know if God exists, I'm like, you're darn right. Because if you do meet the God of the universe, you will know that you know that you know it. And so when you tell me that the God you were introduced to, you still have questions about, I mean, I won't hit the clapping button again, but that's where I'm at. Like, yeah. Good for you. Yeah. Get on it. Don't write the end of the story and keep pursuing truth. That's where the magic is. Yeah. Study different religions if you want to, but at the end of the day, keep pursuing truth, and truth will lead you to Jesus. Yeah.
And it's like I've heard you say before that we don't pursue God because we're good. We pursue God because we're curious. Right. And I mean, that should be a relief to a lot of us. Sure. Like, you don't have to live up to a certain standard to continue to pursue God. Right. But as your curiosity takes you there.
Yeah. And for all of my theologians, I mean, it's the doctrine of prevenient grace. That God chose you, you did not choose him. Mm-hmm. You responded to him choosing you. Mm-hmm. And so we choose the Lord because we're curious, and he's the one that gave us that curiosity. Yeah. And so again, it gets back into the idea of an emotion ship. God, just even the word comes with all of this built-in emotion and branding and packaging that someone other than God had to build for you and interpret for you. And it's not always right.
Sure.
And so when somebody says, I don't know if God exists, I get it. But the beautiful part about it is you've been invited into figure that out for yourself. God is a series of shapes we identify as letters that communicate a reality, right, that we can all relate to and be on the same page. Mm-hmm. I say, God, you have some sort of idea as to what I'm talking about. But the truth of the matter is, and this is what's so important about emotion ships, is often the attempt to describe the reality becomes greater than the reality itself. And the Hebrew people knew this going back 8,000 years ago, and it's why they refused to put the last letter in to his name.
Yeah. Pretty remarkable.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah. And so when it comes to, getting back to that Instagram post, that is why I am so passionate about it, because it is very important for people to understand, like, man, you've got to give yourself permission to go for it. You've got to be okay with not getting it all right. Mm-hmm. And it is true that in a lot of cases, the world will see the one thing you did wrong versus the 99 things you did right. And you got to get back up and keep marching. That getting it wrong is a part of the process. In closing, I remember my sophomore year, like I was so insecure because of my learning disability. I still do this. I would double and triple guess everything that I was going to say. And it would lead to more mistakes because I was paranoid of making mistakes. Yeah. And so I'm reading, I think it's a freshman actually, some freshman English class, and the teacher says, Charlie, you're going to read the first 7 paragraphs for us.
Oh, jeez.
And it's just like, oh my gosh, I was absolutely terrified.
Sure.
Right? And so I'm looking at every word, and every word looks like it's spelled in some sort of Sanskrit that I couldn't read. Mm-hmm. And I'm just saying, don't mess up, don't mess up, don't mess up. Well, the word comes along, Gnats. Gnats.
Oh, okay. Uh-huh.
And of course, I pronounce it Gnats.
Yeah. Who wouldn't?
And the whole class erupts.
Oh, buddy.
And
I'm sorry.
It literally was just that, because of I was associating my value and how I could contribute to my community or my class or whatever. Like my value was wrapped up in my ability not to mess things up.
Right. Well, just a few years later, you were buying your wife a $1 million wallet. So you made it, buddy. You did just fine.
Well, it is, where is our value? Where does it come from? And understanding that is what frees us up to be contributors and to live the life that we were designed to live.
Yeah, that's good.
Ladies and
good
gentlemen,
words.
Emotion Ships episode 10, all finished.
It's a wrap.
We'll see you next time.